Okay, good afternoon everyone. Let's study. So we have the first test, part of the KSG test series and crash course program. First question. The first question is fastest conception of state. How to approach the question? We'll keep the discussion very specific to how we have to move forward so that we exactly know what needs to be written and where we need to move forward. So we'll not waver around here and there and waste time. Okay, so as you can see, the first question, fastest conception of state. First of all, when we talk about fastest conception of state, we are more interested in the fascism which came in Italy and Germany. So the major point with respect to the discussions which we'll do, we'll be restricting ourselves to there only. Obviously you can incorporate more ideas from maybe Argentina also, Portugal also, but if you are telling about Italy and Germany, then also it's fine. Now, the most important idea in this question is, when we are asking the fastest conception of state, how have fascists conceived the state? First of all, their state was a totalitarian state. Okay, this you can write from the perspective, from in general perspective also, or this you can write from the perspective of Hannah Arendt also, because she has she had classified these regimes into totalitarian regimes. If you are doing from that perspective, that's also a good, I would say, way forward of moving. Okay, आगे चलते हैं. I have written some keywords which should be there in the answers. For example, totalitarian state is very different from a traditional dictatorship because it controls all aspects of your life, whether it is political aspect, whether it is social aspect, whether it is economic aspect, private aspects, all life aspects are controlled by totalitarian states. If you know George Orwell's 1984 novel and you want to give a reference, you can give that also. Okay, so some keywords include collective egoism consumes individual egoism, suggesting that the collective will of the state is going to subsume the individual identity and individual right. There is going to be politicization of masses. In fascist state, there is no scope of civil society. The leader connects directly with the masses. So the in-between space which we study as a part of the liberal domain, that individual space no longer exists. The leader connects directly with the masses, as a result of which there is exceptional politicization of masses. Keywords for us: collective egoism, consuming individual egoism, politicization of masses. Monistic belief in single value system. Monistic belief in single value system means there is only one way in which things have to be done, and that way is what the state is telling you. Okay, now you can add to this that the leader was considered to be all powerful, somewhere closer to what the Nietzsche will call as Superman. If you want to make those comparisons, go ahead and do that, absolutely correct, but that will be only one component. Okay, don't keep on repeating the same thing in too many lines. So till now, if you see, we have talked about three elements, or at least three keywords we have incorporated in our starting. When talking about fascist conception of state, in the introduction you can say that the conception of state in fascism is inspired from the idealistic states conceived by thinkers like Plato and Hegel. If you want to do something like this introduction, go ahead, fine, not a problem. Now comes the important part. When we talk about fascist conception of state, you have to make a distinction between Nazi Germany and the Italy of Mussolini. When it comes to Nazi Germany, state was merely an instrument. It was a means to a larger end. The larger end was supremacy of the Aryan race and the taking forward of this idea. Whereas for Mussolini, state was everything. Two ideas are different. For Germany, the state is nothing but a mere vessel. But for Italy, what is the state? Everything is for the state, nothing beyond the state, nothing outside the state. That's Mussolini's statement. Try to quote this particular quotation also. I'll read it for you very quickly. For Nazi Germany, state was a mere vessel for the achievement of goals. What was that goal? Racial goal of Aryan supremacy, ensuring Aryan supremacy, promoting Aryan supremacy. Alfred Rosenberg dismissed the idea of total state. What's the idea of total state? Something which Mussolini was talking about. He developed the idea of race soul, arguing that the race is the key to people's destiny. This is fascist conception of state for Germany. Whereas for Italy, that was different. In Italy, for Mussolini, everything for the state, nothing against the state, nothing outside the state. Try to incorporate the entire quote itself so that you don't have to explain it further. This conception comes closer to Hegel's conception, whereas for Nazis, that was not the case. This important distinction is something which you have to include in the answer, because the examiner is looking for this element, that are you able to identify that the state was different when it comes to fascism in different countries. Okay, but in the starting, if you want to write, definitely you can say a general term of totalitarianism is associated with fascism, and an absolute belief in the leadership of the leader and an unquestionable obedience for the leader, that is something which is associated with totalitarianism and hence fascism. So with this you can start. Okay, now second aspect, fascist Italy embraced modernization. Germany was more on the lines of peasant ideology. However, although they talked about peasant ideology, but Germany also took forward the modernization aspect. Rather, if you know, Germany was at the forefront when it comes to building of weaponry as well as even the nuclear research. They were at the forefront. So, but they did not accept this. Rather, the peasant ideology and the dismissive nature towards urbanization and industrialization, that was how the narrative was built in Germany. Whereas in Italy, there was no such narrative. They readily embraced modernization. Okay. Then comes corporatism, which is the economic policy of the state. But this is quite an exhaustive answer. You'll have to take few bits from the three ideas. One, the state difference between Italy and Germany. Second, their outlook towards modernization. Third, the corporatism. So corporatism as a third way. No capitalism, no socialism or communism, but corporatism. Whereby, what was corporatism? Business and labor are bound together in organic and spiritual unity. It was based on the idea that the social classes, they do not have inherent conflict. Capitalism, inherent conflict. Socialism is saying inherent conflicts. Capitalism is practicing this. They are saying no, nothing like this exists. So there is a organic and spiritual unity. However, this was only for the sake of saying. At the end of the day, in practice, what happened? Private entities were intimidated and the working class organizations were not allowed to function. The state controlled both the elements of the relations of production, and this but was an important element in the narrative of the state, corporatism. Okay, so in fascist conception, you should make a distinction as to what was preached and what was actually realized. So this is fascist conception of state, the first question. The second question is, personal is political. Very easy, I would say. Personal is political. Okay. In personal is political, essentially what we are trying to say, the main idea of personal is political is that this particular expression explains us the main ideas of radical feminism. Radical feminism via these expressions is trying to make a distinction here between is trying to make a distinction with respect to how the political theory has been biased towards the public sphere, and all the philosophers, they are guilty of the fact that they have not talked about regulation of the private sphere. That's the main idea. Personal is political. In the personal domain, the relations, which is the relation between a man and a woman, this is as much political as the public sphere which the state is regulating. The relation between man and woman is as much political as the relation in the public sphere which the state is regulating. So the power equations which exist between man and woman, they have been outside the scrutiny of the state. This is a problematic aspect. This is a deliberate ignorance by the political philosophers, and all political philosophers are guilty of this. When they want to say this, what they want is come and regulate the private sphere. That is what the major essence is. Who will say? Radical feminists will say. Will the others agree? Maybe, maybe not. That has to be explored in the question. But first you tell that what the main idea of the question is. So if you see, the main idea is that political is located in private life as well. Kate Millett has defined politics as the power structured relationship where one group of person is controlled by another, and this definition is applicable in the private sphere. Why? Because women are being controlled by men. So she's bringing it to the forefront that this is how it is. Next, the sexual division of labor between public man and private woman, considered natural, ensures that private sphere is outside the scrutiny of politics. Now this is very important. So when we talk about in generally this idea, you can make a diagram like this. This is a public man and this is a private woman. So first the words public and private are associated with man and women. This public man goes in the public domain which is regulated by the state. Here he does functions with respect to work. Okay, he is allowed to, let's say, pursue art, literature, okay, study economics. Women on the other hand side, because they belong to household, so they have to restrict themselves to household work, child rearing, this distinction which is created is not natural. This is man-made. This is made by the society. So first of all we have to shatter this distinction. Once we shatter this distinction, now this private word has to be removed, public man has to be removed, women can also be public, men can also be private. That's the main idea of radical feminism. So in this context, the sexual division of labor, now are you writing the expression of sexual division of labor or not? If not, that's a problem. You have to write this expression. The sexual division of labor between public man and private woman, that was shattered through after this kind of a idea is coming into picture. Personal is political. Fine. However, now we come to the second part. Radical and socialist feminists argue for the regulation of private sphere, whereas liberal feminists, they are not very much in favor of the state intervening in the private domain. Why? Because that domain is individuals' private domain, and for liberals that comes under their dignified life, the idea of privacy, so nobody should be able to invade that. But for radicals and socialists, they are allowing for state intervention. Not all liberals are opposing this, but within the liberal feminists, we have liberal feminists asking us to be cautious of inviting the state into the personal sphere. These elements have to be written in the answer. Okay, liberal feminists, they'll demand access to public sphere for women, but are cautious of retaining private sphere outside the state interference on the grounds of liberty and privacy. Fine. So this is something which you have to take care in this particular question. So very easy. Personal is political, explain, talk about the fact that this has been created as a notion since a long period of time. There is a need to this uh, de- decapitate the entire idea of public man and private woman. On top of that, one important thing, this is not mentioned here, socialist feminists, they are arguing for the regulation of private sphere because for them keeping women within the households serves the cause of capitalism. Capitalism demands men who come and work and are taken care of when they go back home. Women are supposed to do that. So women being restricted to the households is also serving the cause of capitalism. That is why they are also saying that yes, there is a need for the state to come and liberate the woman from the private sphere. If you want to write for value addition, I'll tell you a few things for value addition also related to the Indian context and say that now the state has come after this idea of personal is political came into being. Now the effect of this slogan, the effect of this particular slogan on the radical feminist movement as well as the women empowerment is that the state has actually come into the private domain. And you can talk about how there are laws which prohibit which criminalize domestic violence. There are laws which will be related to, let's say, the prohibition of dowry. There are now laws with respect to marital rape. So state is coming within the private sphere. Okay. So again, some more details are written here. One of the suggestions of the radical feminists is that you transfer the responsibility of the private life to public sphere. There should be places where the babies can be uh, reared. Women can take them, state can take care of this. The private responsibilities of women should be either shared by men or they should be made a part of public sphere which the state takes up upon itself. Only then what political aspects are going on in the family, they will be taken care of. Another suggestion is the distribution of housework and the process of conditioning. So the socialization process which happens and how the housework is distributed, this also needs to change. Men should do more housework and the conditioning of men should be changed so that they are comfortable doing the tasks which are done by women. Those suggestions, again, whether you will be able to put these suggestions or not, that's entirely up to you. It depends also whether the question is asked in a 10 marker or 15 marker. I have included everything so that while you are preparing, you prepare it holistically, and then even if a 15 marker comes, write it. Okay. Third question is the relevance of the empirical approach to political theory. Relevance of empirical approach to political theory, how to look at this. Now, I think this is a very easy question. They have asked it multiple times, this kind of a question, but again, this can very easily come again also. So on one hand side, we have the nature based on and the criteria of validity. I'll not suggest that you go for this kind of approach. Better go for a paragraph form of approach. So we are asked, the question is essentially relevance of empirical approach. Empirical, you can start with the fact that both approaches to the study of political science serve as important theoretical frameworks and means through which political theories and outcomes are envisaged. When we talk about normative and empirical political theory, both are as old as the political theory. Traditionally, it has been the normative political theory which has been getting more focus of the political philosophers, but in the contemporary times, empirical political theory has also gotten a lot of emphasis. Something on these lines you can use for starting, or simply you can say empirical approach is one of the most important approaches in the contemporary political theory, because contemporary political theory will say is more empirical than the ancient political theory. So this kind of a argument can be made. Fine. Then all those aspects related to empirical and normative, you can compare it, but in this part, because the relevance of empirical is asked, so need not go into the comparison part. You simply talk about the fact that empirical gives us a more scientific way of understanding the political phenomena, because it is descriptive, it is value neutral, its focus areas remain to be its ideas are its judgments are related to the true and false conceptions. It will not be prescriptive and will not suggest right and wrong, which is more scientific in orientation. Then you can give some examples also from ancient times. You can talk about some examples from contemporary times also. You should talk about examples. So make sure that both examples are given in the answer. For example, if we talk about the traditional political theory, you can give the example of Aristotle's theory of revolution. If we talk about modern times, you can talk about Marx's analysis of capitalism, or Locke's idea that mind is tabula rasa, and this mind tabula rasa then absorbs things from the world, and from there the absorption has given us this rationality, given us this experience that a consent based government is the right form of government. So if you want to relate it there to Locke's theory and Locke's ideas, this can also be one example of empirical approach. Okay, now here it is written, contemporary political science gives prominence to empirical approach and traditional is dominated by normative. So this can be something which you can use for introductions. Now there are some examples of normative theory also given. Some proponents are also given here for empirical and normative. You will not be able to include this in this answer, but if answer comes of distinction, then also the content is there. Now this is important, that when we talk about conclusion to such a question, never say that only empirical is important. Always suggest that both the approaches are important. We have both approaches giving us a framework as to how to analyze the social phenomena. Normatives, the normative political theory and normative way of thinking is going to tell us that okay, this is a particular way of doing things, this is the right way of doing things, and now we will use this idea as a benchmark to see how close we are to this. But to understand how close we are to this, I need empirical approach. My normative is going to set standards, my empirical is going to check those standards. And what good is normative theory if I don't have something to verify whether what it is saying is right or wrong? Empirical is verifying the claims of normative. I need to have some claims to verify them. Relevance, both are relevant. Make some claims, I'll verify it. If they are verified, then okay, what you were saying was right, and we have conceived it in a scientific manner, so the legitimacy of the argument is going to increase. Be it that way. So both are important for me. I need normative to set benchmarks, I need empirical to verify those benchmarks. Okay. Now one important aspect for the empirical political theory is that when we talk about empirical political theory, it brings the subject more closer to disciplines like economy, sociology and psychology. And if you see, these are modern subjects. When we talk about law, philosophy and history, normative political theory will be more closer to this. Empirical political theory is more closer to this. And this is somewhere we'll say that it is more modern in outlook. It is more modern in outlook. And because it is more modern in outlook, probably it has more relevance in the contemporary times. This is something which you can use while writing the relevance, okay, earlier. But otherwise, take care of the conclusion in such questions. Otherwise, it's a relatively easy question, simply asking you the relevance of empirical approach. Do not belittle the other approach. Next, challenges to neoliberalism. Okay, factors challenging the hegemony of neoliberalism. How is the philosophy of neoliberalism getting challenged today? That's the main idea. Now, a very good introduction can be through this line that liberal triumphalism needs to be tempered with the recognition of new challenges. That's a new introduction. Liberal triumphalism needs to be tempered by the recognition of new challenges. Otherwise, if you want to talk about the end of history thesis in the starting, you can do that also. That the collapse of the Soviet in 1991 was proclaimed to be the end of history by Francis Fukuyama and the historic win for liberalism. You can talk about this. Then after that you can write, however, liberal triumphalism has to be now in the 21st century tempered with new challenges. This can be a good introduction for you. Okay. Now, where are the challenges coming from? This is a very important aspect. Use this in your essays also, where the issues are coming from when it comes to neoliberalism. This is very important, that first challenge is coming from within. So, when we talk about the global capitalist system, the first challenge which is coming is in the form of rising inequality, for which you can mention examples like Occupy Wall Street movements also, or you can talk about the Oxfam report also, which is coming on a yearly basis. You can talk about numbers from there also. You can talk about Thomas Piketty's book also. But first challenge which comes from within is because of the rise of inequality. There is inherent opposition to the idea of liberal capitalism. Try to mention examples like the increasing vote share of people like Bernie Sanders in the previous presidential elections in US. That is reflective of the fact that there is a growing discontent against the liberal philosophy which is being practiced. The recent changes, political changes in UK, you can include it and write it as a part of an event signaling the problems with the global capitalist order. Then you can talk about the rise of Trump and the rise of far right also, and related to the discontents of capitalism from within the developed world. These are discontents from the developed world itself. We have not gone to outside world as of now. We are saying neoliberalism is being challenged from the developed world itself in the form of these events. Then the second challenge to neoliberalism is from the philosophy of communitarians as well as multiculturalists. Why? There is a recognition of the importance of diversity. Diversity is being recognized, diversity is being celebrated. Who is celebrating? Communitarians, who are talking about not the atomistic man but the embedded self, and multiculturalists, who are talking about the politics of recognition, that we need to give recognition to either the minorities or the aboriginals, or for that matter immigrants also. When there is a recognition and a politics associated with that recognition of differences, at that point of time value pluralism will also come, and this is going to challenge the value monism of liberals. Very important aspect. So this philosophies, communitarian, simply you can mention, if you want to mention Michael Walzer. Multiculturalist, if you want to mention Bhikkhu Parekh, up to you, but include these keywords, that a theoretical opposition is coming in the form of these ideologies. And you can even talk about how the ideas of these ideologies are being practically implemented also, whereas you can give the example of Canada when it comes to multiculturalism and how they are celebrating this multiculturalism and how the legal frameworks have been changed. Okay, the next is postmodernism. This also we should write. It is critical of the entire Enlightenment project. For Michel Foucault, there is nothing called truth. So, the end of history, the end of ideology, all these far-fetched arguments are false, and they are essentially a product of knowledge power framework. Knowledge power framework. Narratives are being built, regimes of truth are being built. So, whether it is liberalism, socialism, they are all regimes of truth. Similarly, whether it is capitalism here, neoliberalism here, they are all regimes of truth. They cannot claim monopoly over truth. They are anti-foundationalist. So, any kind of a foundational idea in the form of liberalism or capitalism, they are going to be opposing this particular phenomena. Again, a theoretical challenge to neoliberalism. Okay, this one I have already discussed within the first point. Rise of authoritarian nationalism, which is wedded to the idea of ethnic purity within the liberal world and outside the liberal world. Okay, this part is not discussed. Within the liberal world, we have talked about this. You can include Make America Great Again here. You can even talk about some fascist groups which have given which have pledged support to these kinds of ideas, the white supremacist ideas. You can talk about groups in Austria also, France also, and you can maybe give a reference to them if you want to give. Outside liberal world, the rise of China, East Asian tigers, they are rising without liberalism. Okay, you can give this idea also. And in practical sphere, you can talk about this. So when you're talking about this, these are all practical examples. First, you can give a theoretical framework. Theoretical framework you can give in terms of Asian values. You can give in terms of cultural relativism. Okay, and then after telling about cultural relativism and your Asian values, then as a part of example, you can talk about example the rise of China and East Asian tigers. So that's a very holistic answer when it comes to neoliberalism and a very common theme which has been asked. 2 years back, UPSC asked a question whereby they were saying that neoliberalism is being challenged by forces of nation, culture, ethnicity. Basically, all are included here. Fine. The answer to that PYQ. Okay, let's take the discussion forward. Now we have the next question. Next question is Hannah Arendt's criticism of modernity. Now, Hannah Arendt's criticism of modernity, I would say it's a good question why UPSC has not asked it till now. So we are expecting something of this sort to be asked, not asked till now. What you have to include here? Hannah Arendt's criticism of modernity. First idea which should come to your mind is this modernity criticized for the first time? No. Thinkers like Rousseau, Gandhi, they have been critical of modernity. Postmodernism in our times is critical of modernity. So knowing all this can give you a good head start. You can write it in the introduction that criticism to modernity is not new. It has been done before Hannah Arendt also, and the contemporary of Hannah Arendt, Gandhi, has also done, and later on postmodernists have also done. But the manner in which she does this particular criticism, that is unique, and while you are writing it from her perspective, you have to ensure that you include the keywords associated with her ideas. What is that? First of all, Hannah Arendt's criticism of modernity is influenced by the rise of social. Rise of social means expansion of market economy and the victory of animal laborum over zoon politikon, which means that we have become a kind of society which is concerned with market economy and where the value of political participation is less than the value of physical labor which you are doing. Animal laborum is the physical work which you do. For this, you need to know the distinctions between animal laborum and zoon politikon. What are those differences? I think it was here. कहीं पर तो था. Yes. So we have labor, work and action. Labor is animal laborum. All animals perform it. Basic tasks. Work is homo faber. The tasks which are tied to the condition of worldliness. That means those tasks which we do as a part of being inhabiting this world and being a member of society. But the task which is zoon politikon, which he calls as action, or sometimes he calls that political action, that is the real work which an individual is expected to do, which a human is expected to do, because this work is only associated with the humanity. Until you are not doing this work, you are not actually living as per what you are supposed to live. जीना नहीं आता तुमको, ठीक है? Human का काम है ये करना, action. It is only when you do action, that is the time when you are able to realize what? That is the time when you are able to realize your human existence. He uses the word human existence. But he is saying animal laborum has won over zoon politikon. That is why he is critical of modernity. You are not living your life as per how human existence is supposed to be. You are giving more preference to the labor work which has to be done by all animals, and you are doing this because the market economy is forcing you to do this. Today we are living in an age of bureaucratic states, as a result of which the work is nothing but a kind of the segmentations associated work is going to alienate you and you are not realizing your true self. The same idea which we'll discuss later on, the alienation of Karl Marx also. Stay with me. Okay, so we are back. So she has associated first of all modernity. What is modernity for her? This is modernity for her. Then she is again talking about modernity as an age of bureaucratic administration, anonymous labor, elite domination and manipulation of public opinion. Try to have these keywords in the answer so as to explain first of all what is modernity. Now, after the modernity has come, this is the characteristics of modernity, and after this, modernity is creating problems in the sense, as I told you earlier, it leads to alienation of man from political sphere. That is why she is critical. You can mention this in the form that zoon politikon, it has lost value. The ideas. Now this is a very important thought which you can use in your essays also. Freedom, plurality and solidarity are sacrificed. Freedom sacrificed, plurality sacrificed, solidarity sacrificed. For what? For abundance and productivity. Now this abundance and productivity is primarily of economic domain, and you have made the economic domain more important than the political domain, and that is why the consequences are as worse as totalitarianism. She says we are living in a time whereby this economic domain, this particular economic domain, we are living in a time whereby this particular economic domain has taken precedence over political domain. Political domain is where the zoon politikon is. Economic domain for her can either be classified under animal laborum or it may come under homo faber also. But these domains do not help you realize your true existence. And on top of that, because of the fact that bureaucratic administrations are there and there is manipulation of public opinion, unfortunately, as a result of this, what we have is a situation where the masses, they don't understand the kind of oppression which is there, and modernity has brought all these aspects with itself. The rise of social market economy has triumphed the animal laborum over zone politikon, and the nature of the state, the working of the state, anonymous labor we are providing, nobody knows who the other person is. Their work with respect to production is has dehumanized them, and as a result of which they are not living a life which a human being is supposed to live. A human being is supposed to do action, political action. Human being is supposed to value freedom, plurality and solidarity, and we are not doing this, and this is the result of modernity. That is her basic idea. These words have to be there, okay, especially rise of social and especially zone politikon, and the fact that economic domain has won over political domain. Okay, now we come to the next question. Discuss Machiavelli's views on statecraft. Fairly easy question. Machiavelli's views on statecraft, but it's a 20 marker, so you have a lot of things to write. Whenever such questions come, please make it very clear as to how you are going to approach it, because there is a big possibility in such questions that you will write too much but the content will be less. So make sure that few dimensions have to be included when talking about his views on statecraft. Don't keep on telling his views on everything. No, his views on only statecraft are asked. So restrict yourself to those views. Okay, how can we approach this particular question? We can approach it after I am able to go out of this PPT and open the PDF. Okay, Machiavelli and statecraft. So there are numerous ways of introducing the question. You can talk about the importance of his book, The Prince. You can talk about how his recommendations are one of the most practiced recommendations, especially in international relations. You can talk about the fact that Machiavelli's ideas lay the foundation stone for the realist school of thought. All this can be introduction to this particular question, or you can simply write, in politics ends justifies the means. This sums up Machiavelli's views on statecraft. Something like this can be introduction also. Okay, so all these are written here. Then in body, these three aspects have to be discussed specifically. What are these three aspects? One is, in politics ends justifies the means. What is the meaning of this? Two meanings. We are creating a separate domain of politics, so an autonomous sphere of politics is created. Ends justifies the means. And secondly, we are creating a dual morality also, that in politics the morality is different, in normal life the morality is different. Two things. One, the domain of politics is different. It has an autonomous sphere in itself. What is the meaning of this? It means whatever conceptions of right and wrong you have, those conceptions of right and wrong may not apply to the field of politics. Why? Because the field of politics has a separate set of rules and regulations. It is an autonomous sphere in itself. Law is one sphere, politics is one sphere, ethics is one sphere, okay, philosophy is another sphere, socio is another sphere, politics is a sphere. It has its own rules and regulations, and in politics the most important rule is that the ends are going to justify the means. Now This is one of his most important ideas on statecraft. After this, he is also suggesting the prince as to how to move forward with respect to statecraft, where he gives a suggestion to the prince that he has to be a lion and a fox at the same point of time. He has to be brave like a lion, he has to be clever like a fox, simply because of the fact that he needs to crush his enemies. So he should be like a lion, and while crushing his enemies, he should be ruthless. Second, he should be like a fox because there will be continuous plotting against him by nobles, by his confidants, and he has to be clever enough so as to outwit all of them. So he suggests the prince to indulge into activities like uh, using religion for own benefit. So a utilitarian view of religion can be included here in his cleverness, or otherwise simply the fact that he should take everything with a pinch of salt. Third is, again, practice realpolitik. Do not be influenced by ideological claims. He should have a utilitarian view of religion. He should use religion to the benefit of ensuring that he remains in power. Fine. Now, these views on statecraft, I think they are relatively easy. People can do this. In such questions, after explaining that yes, these are the views on statecraft, what you can do is you should go for this significance and criticism part. Generally, you will go for the criticism part, but significance part is also important. First is that through his thoughts, he is laying the intellectual foundations for the realist school of thought. And the second is, through his thoughts, he is also providing the basis for politics as a separate domain. This is in sharp distinction of the conception of states, which has been the norm of the day, because how the state has been formulated was on the ideas of Plato and Aristotle, or the Greek thinkers, whereby the state doing politics and ethics was not conceived to be separate, but he is saying they are separate. So that's the original contribution of Machiavelli. In that time, this was a very important change which he was propagating, a change which gave him a sinister reputation, a change which led to uh, him becoming one of the most criticized political thinkers of that time also. But this is very important. Here you should actually relate to the fact that the ethical framework for the state which has been created by the Greek thinkers, and something which was even being taught by the church, this his teachings were in opposition to both of them. So that's a sharp distinction, and that is where we will also say later on that he is bringing modernity. He is standing at the gates of modernity. We talk about modernity in PSIR with respect to Machiavelli and Hobbes, like who is the first modern thinker. He is standing at the gates of modernity because he is making such a conception which is related to the politics of today, which is an intrinsic part of politics today. So definitely relate to what was earlier. Then you come to the criticism, and in criticism, please tell more than what Gandhi has said. Everybody is writing Gandhi, Gandhi. I have given you two more criticisms. Leo Strauss calls him teacher of evil. You can include this. Sabine has called him amoral. And now, in addition to this, this is criticism, but this is another viewpoint which Pollock is presenting. Pollock is saying that Machiavelli was extremely scientific and detached. He was not judgmental, but he was simply listing the rules of political action. So why this becomes important? Because after Machiavelli gave his teachings, his book was burnt. He was considered a sinister, and uh, he faced the wrath of the church. But Pollock is saying Machiavelli is wrongly criticized. His ideas are not propagating immorality, but he is simply listing the scientific rules to play the game of politics. So That is how Pollock has tried to tamper the criticism which is abundant when it comes to Machiavelli. Try to include this also. This will give you that value addition that yes, he was simply doing this. Okay, so it's a 20 marker. I think we have enough content for this. Okay, now we come to the next question. Why is Michel Foucault's theory of power called the sociological understanding of power? It's a question on power, it's a question on postmodernism, both. Easy question, I would say. It's not that tough. What is the question saying? Why Michel Foucault's theory of power is called sociological understanding of power? So now what we need to understand here, three things which have to be a part of your answer to tell how his understanding is sociological understanding. First of all, before we move into this sociological understanding, the basic idea is that when it comes to power, power has always been associated with state structure. Power has always been associated with the agency. Agency can be individual, agency can be a state. Now in 20th century, the power is understood to be in a very different manner. First it was Gramsci who said power lies in civil society. Then it is Hannah Arendt, she is saying power actually is a sui generis concept which comes into being when the people come together and it goes away when the people are not together. So she is also presenting a conception of power which is not only unconventional, but at the same time she is taking away the idea of power from a particular agency, and she is rooting power in collection of individuals. Gramsci has taken power from the realm of state and shifted it to civil society. Hannah Arendt is taking power and she is placing it in a collectivity of individuals. These are new conceptions of power. Michel Foucault is taking it one step further and he is saying again similar things. Power is not in the state, power is not in the individual, but power runs through the society. Because for him, power is not a function of agency. That is why we are saying that his conception of power is unconventional, and when he says it's not a function of agency or a structure, but he's saying that it runs through the society like the blood flows in the capillary, that it is everywhere. He's saying the power is everywhere. It is like air, it's everywhere. So he is conceptualizing power in a very different terms. Because of the fact that this power permeates the society, that is why it is called as a sociological understanding of power. This power permeates the society, in which the first basic idea is that how he conceives power is through the knowledge power framework, knowledge power nexus. That is a very, very important framework of knowledge power, the essence of which is knowledge and power, they reinforce each other. Power creates knowledge, knowledge sustains power. Power creates knowledge, knowledge sustains power. It is the interplay of power which created knowledge. What kind of knowledge? He's saying you create narratives, you create truths. Who is creating truth? Who is creating knowledge? Those in power, those in power in the sense, those who are the elites, who are conceiving the ideas of right and wrong, they are also creators of narratives. Gramsci has also said something like this: it is the dominant class which is creating the narratives. It is the dominant class which is creating hegemony, ideological power. He is saying these frameworks which are created, these narratives which are created, this knowledge which is created, they are created by people who are leading the society, and the knowledge then comes to serve them back. If a knowledge is created with respect to a particular idea is being reinforced with knowledge. He says that becomes the dominant truth of that time. The dominant truth of the time can be that homosexuality is immoral. The dominant truth of that time. It's not the dominant truth of today. It is created out of a Victorian morality which is not acceptable today. It served the purpose of some people. He says that if you are labeling someone as insane, that is because you have now the knowledge of psychology and psychoanalysis. Before the knowledge of psychology came into being, the insane people were a part of society. Now insane people are sent to asylums because the knowledge operated on them and said that they need to be separated from the society and put into separate places. That's how the knowledge has served some people who may be the creators of the knowledge itself. He says the society works in this fashion, where knowledge is going to create power, power is going to reinforce the knowledge, power is going to create knowledge, knowledge is going to sustain power. And this way, dominant truths will be made, which he calls as the regimes of truth, and regimes of truth will keep on changing from time to time. In this manner, society, he says, wherever the knowledge is, whatever your conceptions are with respect to right and wrong, you are under the operation of a power. That is something which you don't know. So that is why it is permeating the entire society. Another example which he gives in his next work, where he talks about disciplinary power, how people are conditioned to societal norms. He takes the example of that panopticon prison. A prison at the center of which there is a high tower, and on that tower a guard is seated who can view at the individual cells of each of the prisoners. There is a high tower and it's a prison, and he can view individual cells. He gives this idea that the prisoners inside these cells, they are thinking that the guard is constantly looking at them, because this is how the prison is made. And because of this, what is happening is the prisoners inside, they are behaving themselves. That's the surveillance mechanism. That's the surveillance mechanism which is underway. He gives the example of panopticon to say that in the society we are constantly being watched upon so that we conform to the societal norms. Societal norms are first decided, then everybody has to conform to that societal norms. It is just like a prison whereby a person who is believed, who is believed to be having a line of sight into your cell, is believed to be watching you, as a result of which you are yourself conditioning yourself. So this mechanism conditions you. This is how he says numerous bodies, numerous institutions in the society work. He says you are constantly being conditioned so as to act in a particular way. You go to the school will start at 7:30, the next period will start at 8:30, the next will start at 9:30, at 10 o'clock there will be a break. After that you will have another 2 sessions. After that there is going to be a games period. After that you are going to come back home. After coming home you are expected to complete homework, you are expected to do extracurricular activities. If you come to school, you are expected to wear a certain kind of cloth, you are expected to behave in the class in a certain fashion. At all points of time, you are told this is the right way to be doing things. At all points of time, you are being conditioned so that you conform to the societal norms. This, he says, is the disciplinary power which operates across the entire society. And he makes a very worrying comment where he says schools serve the same social function as prisons and mental institutions, which is to define, classify, control and regulate people. If you can include this, well and good. Third kind of power is the biopower, which works in close nexus with the knowledge power relationship, which I've already explained to you. Psychiatrist turns homosexuality into perversion. This was because the study of psychiatrist came into being. Okay, it's a new study. Psychology, psychiatry, psychoanalysis, and new studies, new knowledge, exploitative for homosexuals. But this new knowledge operates across the spectrum of the society. Hence, sociological understanding of power. So this should be the content, ideal content. Okay. Now let's move forward. The question is, one is not born a woman but becomes a woman. Simon de Beauvoir. Very, very easy, very, very common question. How to start this? I've written two introductions. It summarizes the political ideology of SDB, Simon de Beauvoir, or the above quote is the introduction to her book and captures the essence of her epistemology. You can copy these two introductions. Now, what is the entire question all about? So I'll not spend too much time on this. It is relatively easy. She is using a existentialism to say that the existence precedes essence. She is concerned because the essence of a woman is given to her by the society, but she is made to believe that that is her existence. So she wants to unravel this, unfold this societal framework which is working, which says that certain things are your essence, but you are being made to believe that that is how your existence is meant to be. A sense of an individual is given after the existence is her viewpoint. Existence is first, then comes essence. Essence is who you are. She says that is given to a woman and she is made to believe that it is who she is. So there are two different things. The patriarchy, which functions in a manner such that it tells women that these are the characteristics, traits, behaviors and attitudes which should be exhibited by a woman. This is an essence being given to a woman by a society which is male dominated. That's her essence. That's her basically idea. Let's not use essence here. That's her basic idea. So while she is talking about this, she is saying humans through their consciousness are giving meaning to their life, and this woman, she is given also this by this society. So what she says, she traces the journey of women from that of a wife or a mother or to a libido serving prostitute of man. She traces this entire journey of women and she concludes that at each point in her life, when she is a mother, when she is a wife or a partner, she essentially tends to the needs of man. So if she is a partner, she is tending to a need of the man. If she is a mother, she is tending to the need of a man. In case of partner, she is tending to the needs of companionship or stability. When she takes up the role of a mother, she is tending to the needs of man, such that she is taking care of her of his children. And if she is taking up the role of a prostitute, sorry, then also she is tending to the libido of the man. So in all these cases, she is saying that women, we have to write the keywords, okay, which she uses. She says the women during this entire time, she is always, kahan gaya? She is always secondary, provisional, inessential, whereas man is primary, absolute, and essential. She is always the object and man is the subject. So she is talking essentially about the existence of a woman. She is saying her entire existence is in reference to a man. She does not enjoy her own subjectivity. She is not allowed to have claims to a subjective individual experience which may be associated only with her. No, subjective individual experience. You should be shy. You should act like this. You should wear these kinds of clothes. This is not her subjective individual identity. She is always conforming to the conception which the society has given, that you are expected to be like this. What if she does not feel like this? That is where Simon de Beauvoir is questioning. So at the heart of this entire idea of one is not born but becomes a woman is the fact that sex and gender have to be differentiated. Sex is biological, gender is societal, and all the characteristics associated with women, they are not the result of who she is, but they are the result of her essence being given to her by a society which is male dominated. Now, after writing all this, करना पड़ेगा, ठीक है? This is a very important keyword. She suffers from a dilemma whether she exists as a human being or she accepts her destiny as a woman. She can't chase her destiny as a woman because she's living a part in a society which is expecting her to be like some conceptions of women the society has created, and now you have to be like this. Versus, can she exist as a human being? That means, can she enjoy her own subjective individual experiences and be according to that? She is always in a dilemma what to choose. Hence, she is not born a woman, but the essence of entire woman is given to her. So one is not born but becomes a woman after the society gives it to the women. So very important that you write the analysis here also. Her work inspired second wave feminism and the sex gender distinction, which provided analytical framework to criticize and evaluate patriarchal systems. Do write the importance of her work. In such a question, it is expected because her work is considered to be one of the most influential works which led to the second wave of the radical wave of feminism. Okay. Do you think modern nation state has been declining in the wake of globalization? Discuss in the light of impact of globalization on state sovereignty. So, such kind of a question can come in paper 2 part A also, but unfortunately they asked this question earlier also. It's a PYQ only. They have asked this question earlier also. Modern nation state has been declining in the wake of globalization. Now, actually this question basically demands you to know that there are three schools of thought which have their own viewpoints, and actually we don't know whether this phenomena is actually happening or not, but these three schools of thought, they keep on fighting. with each other. So it's important that you mention them. First, for a question like this, which relates nation state to globalization and sovereignty, what you should say actually is, the question is basically saying this process of globalization is impacting the sovereignty element of nation state. That's the basic question about. So first, write a good introduction for a question like this. Like, there's a huge change which is happening. Nation states are, nation states have been with us since the times of 1648 when the Peace of Westphalia comes into picture. And now we are saying that these nation states, which were built on the mutually accepted idea that, okay, I have my territory, you have your territory, you are your sovereign in one area, I am sovereign in another area. And on this basis, the entire modern world is working, whereby we have individual nation states who work on this idea of sovereignty, and our entire frameworks are meant to be on this idea of sovereignty, and international law works on these frameworks. We are saying this element is getting affected by globalization. So the long-term impacts, we don't know where we are going, and we don't have to worry about that aspect in this particular question. We are more interested in the immediate concerns of how globalization, if it is leading to changes, then whether the claims are true or not. So you will give the arguments from both the sides. One will say yes, it is changing, the other will say no, it is not changing, and the third will say there is no zero sum game. Both are getting influenced by each other. That is what the third will say, so as to end the debate. But a very good introduction for a question like this can be, no development has challenged the conventional state-centric image of world politics more radically than the emergence of globalization. I think it's a very good introduction. You can copy it as it is. No development has challenged the conventional state-centric image of world politics more radically than the emergence of globalization. Now here globalization, we are talking about globalization which has emerged after primarily 1950s. Okay. Otherwise, if you talk about globalization coming from the times, if we think from the perspective of Emmanuel Wallerstein, he is saying globalization is continuing since the emergence of modernity. No, we are not talking about that. We are restricting our understanding to the recent times, the last 70 odd years. So, three schools of thought, take into picture these. I think I provided you notes for this also. I think in portal you will find notes for this. If there are not, just let me know. Kenichi Ohame and Susan Strange, they talk about the state being in retreat, the sovereignty is challenged, the MNCs, the civil society networks, contemporary global concerns like terrorism, climate change, as a result of which no state can claim that they are sovereign. No state can claim that they are sovereign because these changes, they are a part of how the social life is lived now. So definitely sovereignty is challenged. Another school of thought, which is a realist school of thought presented by thinkers like Robert Gilpin, he'll talk about that the globalization itself is being driven by the state. It is not something which is it's not such something which the globalization is impacting to the extent that we can say that it is being challenged. Third, Bob Jessup and David Held. David Held, we study in the idea of cosmopolitan democracy also. Bob Jessup and David Held are saying sovereignty is getting affected by globalization, globalization getting controlled by sovereignty. Now, if you want to give examples here of Paris Climate Deal, global cooperation on terrorism, global cooperation on preventing nuclear proliferation, sorry, you can give all those ideas also to suggest that it is impossible to have that kind of a sovereignty as envisaged in the Hobbesian sense. Okay, Hobbesian sense, Austinian sense of sovereignty does not exist. We'll again say this idea when we do pluralism. Okay, easy question I would say. Okay, now this is a good question. Do you think fascism is compatible with contemporary times in context of globalization? So basically it is asking whether fascism can exist in times like today or not. Is it compatible? Why we are asking this question is primarily because there has been a debate. There has been a debate as to the origins of fascism. Now when we talk about origins of fascism, we have two primary ideas which were there since a long period of time until some new works have been done on fascism. One is the idea of Ernst Nolte, which says that fascism was a product of specific circumstances. These specific circumstances, they were existing during the interwar period. These specific circumstances no longer exist today. What were the specific circumstances? Modernity was new. Now since we have a long experience of modernity, modernity was new. Democracy has come up. Democracy was giving freedom to people. People sometimes don't know what to do with freedom. They look for security. Specific circumstances in the interwar period, modernity has taken roots. The effects of modernity like individualism, liberty, women's rights, or giving recognition to minorities, aboriginals, this was starting, which was a problematic from the perspective of a traditional framework. Second, economic depression created problems whereby you have high unemployment, you have high inflation, and during such times people are generally vulnerable. During the interwar period, you have a situation whereby there is this wounded nation, Germany, who has been humiliated after the Treaty of Versailles, and they also are looking for some kind of a revenge. There are specific circumstances which don't exist today. But another viewpoint is presented by Eric Fromm, who says that fascism has roots in human psychology. Human psychology, why? In times of fear, human beings look for security and they may agree to place their liberties in front of a strong leader. They lay their liberties in front of a strong leader. Why? It's part of human psychology. Whenever they are fearful, fear of freedom, you have a fear of freedom, too much freedom, you become fearful, you don't know what to do. Tell us what to do. Authoritarian leader will come to tell, or religion may become important to tell what to be done. You also in times of uncertainty may resort to looking towards religious texts to guide you. So this basically debate, we don't know whether actually his idea is correct or whether he is correct, or maybe both are correct to a certain extent, but our analysis is primarily with respect to the fact that how to view things today. In contemporary times, do we have some expressions of fascism? Merely concentration of power does not mean fascism. Do we have totalitarian states coming up? No, we don't have that kind of totalitarianism. There are certain freedoms which are given to people no matter what. Even in countries like China, you would not see the kind of totalitarianism. Yes, maybe North Korea can be a outcast in today's world, but that is not something which can be taken as an example to generalize for the entire world. We are talking about 21st century. We are talking about contemporary times. Can something like fascism become relevant or not? Now, when we talk about this, then generally this question comes because of the working of certain groups in the developed world. For example, certain groups operating in France, Austria, Italy, and even the Ku Klux Klan in America, their narratives, certain times their actions, their calls for solidarity, organic unity, they have been associated with what used to exist during the times of Nazi Germany. And hence, the idea that is something like fascism compatible today? Can it come today? Is it something which is being practiced by these kinds of groups? Will it have popular appeal or not? To which it is too early to say whether it will be or not. Some people say that the rise of far right shows us that these tendencies exist. But at the same time, if a fascist tendency arises today, it will not be the fascism of what used to be in 20th century. On the contrary, it will be fascism which will be maybe something like a neo-fascism, whereby it may have characteristics like it will accept political pluralism and electoral democracy. Why? Because these groups, they are not saying that we will not adopt political pluralism. Fascism, on the other hand side, rejected political pluralism. So, no scope of multiple political parties, no scope of dissent, but they are not per se challenging that idea. They are making peace with electoral democracy. Secondly, there is no reason to believe that they will lay their liberties in front of an absolute leader, because such kind of tendencies are difficult to arise today, especially in the developed world. Okay, overt racism is not there, tendencies of totalitarianism are not there, but despite this, they are advancing what? Organic unity and social cohesion. Now this organic unity and social cohesion, it may be with respect to, let's say, their white supremacy, but it is not practicing overt racism. You will not see anti-Semitism today of the order which was existing earlier. So if I am not overtly racist, if I am not supporting totalitarianism, if I am believing in political pluralism and democracy, and yet I am talking about a certain cohesive identity which comes from ethnic, which comes from ethnic characteristics, or which is related to my ascriptive identity markers, and I'm making a narrative on that front, and I'm making a political appeal on that front. This is something which can find attraction, because ethnic nationalism is also on the rise as a result of the problems associated with capitalism. In these times of inequality, where modernity is challenging to a great extent the traditional notions, and those traditional notions, when they are reacting in the form of ethnic assertions, in these times something like this may exist, which we may call it neo-fascism, but not the conceptions of fascism of the 20th century, because even these groups have not submitted themselves to those kinds of ideas. But because of exactly these reasons, whereby there is this immigration has happened so much, heterogeneous societies are coming into being, inequality is on the rise, this kind of assertion may be possible, which we may call it neo-fascism. Okay, Andrew Haywood calls it neo-fascism. So take care of this, because that's a new dimension. That's a new dimension. Okay. Next question. Because the society is federal, the authority must also be federal. Very, very easy question. What is the question about? The question is about pluralist theory of state. So I'll not go into the details of this. This is very easy. You can look at the PDF. Pluralist theory of state. What it is saying? Society is federal, so authority must also be federal. That means it is saying sovereignty should not be monistic, like something which Hobbes was talking about, but sovereignty should also be federal. Now he'll justify why he's saying this. So since Hobbes, what we have, the idea is that sovereignty rests with the state and state has the monopoly over the sovereignty, but he is basically saying that this conception is problematic. For intro, it reflects Lasky's support for pluralism and it provides evaluation of monistic theory of state sovereignty also. State sovereignty in Hobbesian sense is a myth. It does not exist. Why? Because even in a country like India, when we have federation, the allegiance of people is also to the states as well as to the center. At the same time, the allegiance of people continues to be towards religion and their caste also, in addition to the state. So he's saying that he's trying to justify why he's saying that the authority must be federal. He'll justify this. First, he's saying monistic theory of state sovereignty is a myth. It does not exist. You can talk about these ideas. Then he will justify why it should not be also. He says the needs of the man are multidimensional. Multidimensional need. So what you do? Multiple entities will fulfill that need. State is one such entity. Religion is another such entity. Society is another such entity. That is what the basic idea is. So you have to give justification for the authority to be federal. That is because the needs of man are multi-dimensional. All needs of the man cannot be fulfilled by the state. All needs of the man cannot be fulfilled by the society. Since both are fulfilling certain needs of man, both can command allegiance out of man. And that is where the loyalty towards both entities will come into picture. Okay. Fine. For conclusion, what I have written is that pluralist theory of sovereignty provides a more practical viewpoint. This is important. They are providing a more practical viewpoint. And functional division of authority can hold significance, especially when federal forms of government are prevalent and we are moving towards democratic decentralization. The more we move towards democratic decentralization, the more we are challenging the idea of a monistic theory of state sovereignty. And it's a practical viewpoint that we should do something like this because we are just not ready to accept this is how actually things are existing, and we should accept this. On the contrary, you can also say that it may give rise to centrifugal tendencies also. If you want to have a critical take, it may give rise to centrifugal tendencies. Okay. Next question. Plato's communism is a supplementary machinery to give effect to and reinforce that spirit which education is to create. Now this is a good question. Plato's communism is a supplementary machinery to give effect to and reinforce the spirit which education is to create. Try to understand the question. The question essentially is saying that when it comes to creation of ideal state, in this creation of ideal state, education is a prerequisite. His entire scheme of education where he divides the education amongst initial years, then middle years, then later part of the life. This entire theory of education is a major step in creating an ideal state. Why is this the case? Because education in Athens was private, and this was a big problem for him. The curriculum of the education in Athens was a problem as compared to Sparta, which he felt is a very important reason why the people of Athens elected people who were corrupt and who were responsible for the fall of Athens. So, in order to create an ideal state, the right people have to enter. For the right people to enter, the right people have to be, the people have to be given this education so that they become, so that only those people who are showing the traits which are relevant for a ruler, only those people reach the level from where we are going to choose the rulers. For him, education is that filter without which I cannot get to the philosopher king who will run the ideal state. So education is the most important thing, but so that the certain other ill elements within the human nature with respect to appropriation of property, with respect to collection of wealth, with respect to collecting this entire wealth for your children and for your wife and for your family, these things may lead to corruption in the form of nepotism, favoritism, accumulation of wealth, and may divert the individual. Which individual? The best possible individual, which will later on become the philosopher. This may distract that person from going in the right direction. So what I'll do is, in order to create ideal state, along with education, I will provide communism of wives and property. This is a secondary mechanism. This is not a primary mechanism. This is something which has to be mentioned in the question, because that is what the question is all about. The entire thing is that education is more important. Communism is coming just so as, see, it says it's a supplementary machinery to give effect to and reinforce. So communism is reinforcing it. Which spirit? Which education is to create. Education has to create a spirit. Communism has to reinforce that spirit. So communism is a supplementary mechanism. It will come later on. So the question required you to tell first the importance of education and then how communism is going to help him create an ideal state. Okay. This part is included here. Okay. Now we come to the next question. The next question is again very easy. Discuss the concept of alienation as advocated by Karl Marx. What can be done to change this? Alienation. Now, what is the idea of alienation? Alienation by Karl Marx. This entire thing can be put into the introduction. You may take this as an introduction, and then depending on what kind of question is asked, you may write the introduction. The idea of alienation by Karl Marx is one of the most widely discussed concepts. It is the idea that young Marx developed out of his study of Friedrich Hegel. Remember Hegel, he studied so as to give his own dialectical materialism. He explained the concept of alienation in economical and philosophical manuscripts. This is the work of Karl Marx, the work of young Karl Marx, and later elaborated in his seminal work, Capital. In Karl Marx's understanding, alienation is a feeling of separation from one's own labor and the loss of power over it. So it's a situation of helplessness. It's a situation whereby man loses his individuality, man loses the very reason for why he is a human, man loses his creative freedom, man loses his man is a social animal. किसने कहा था? Man ये भी lose कर देता है. He is no longer able to remain social. The societal aspects are taken away from him, the creative aspects are taken away from him, and he represents a dehumanized self. That is what alienation for Karl Marx is. So alienation happens at essentially 4 levels from the perspective of Karl Marx. Taking the example of a person working in a factory, an apple factory, let's try to understand alienation. A person is working in an iPhone factory in China and he is alienated from the product of his labor because the task which worker is doing in assembling the iPhones, that iPhone, the product does not belong to him. He is doing a task. The entire production mechanism is highly segmented and he is a cog in the wheel. He is just a small entity in this huge network whereby he does not even know what work he is doing will be then processed over and it will lead to creation of a final product. In this scenario, when he works, he is doing his own work, which is again, he is a cog in the wheel, he is doing his bit. The product, final product may look very different and he has no control over that product. Karl Marx is saying you are working but you are alienated from the product of your labor. The labor which you are putting, the labor which an iPhone worker means the one who is involved in the production of iPhones in China. These huge factories are there, the huge workplaces are there where so many workers are employed in assembling iPhone. That person is alienated from the product of his labor. Being a part of this highly segmented process, you are also alienated from the process of production because you are doing only small bit, the rest of the things are being done by some other person. Each of the person, they are playing their own role in a highly segmented production process whereby from the process of production itself you are distanced. You don't have the control of the product, alienated from the product of your labor. You are doing your labor, but that labor has to be worked upon by so many other people and at so many levels so as to make that final product which will go into the market. First, you are alienated from the product of your labor. What labor you are doing, you don't know how that is getting used. Second, the entire process is so big that you feel ignored in the entire process of making this product. He says alienation from the process of labor. Workers in iPhone factories work long hours in poor conditions and for low wages. They perform repetitive tasks. The more the worker produces, the more productive power there is for someone else to own. You put in more hours, you are producing more iPhones which are owned by someone else. Someone else will own the profit, will earn the profit, someone else will own the iPhone also. So that's problematic aspect. You are alienated from the process of your labor. Where does all the work go? While the work sustains the worker, a lot of it goes into reproducing the means of production on behalf of the owners and their power. Where is your work going when you are doing this work? This is increasing the profit of the owner. The owner, after getting a lot of profit, is going to again, let's say, put up a new business. Again, he'll be a owner. You will again go and work there. You will continue to remain a have-not. They'll be the haves, you will be the have-nots. But in this entire process, he's saying not only you are alienated from the product of your labor, because the product of your labor, you don't own it. You are also alienated from the process of the labor. The entire process works in favor of someone else. While you are doing this, you don't have enough time. You don't have enough time to be with your family, to be with the society. And man, being a social animal, is alienated from society also. But while understanding alienation from this example, as per an article in the newspaper, and the content also has this element, so you can look at it. So many strangers work together in production line, in assembly line, and all these people, they are strangers to each other. So the work is a place where you go to sell your labor to earn wage, and it is not a place where you feel like home. It is not a society where you can have a relationship, but it's merely a place of strangers. So work is a place where you don't feel at home, where you don't feel comfortable, where you don't feel that it is a important element of the life. Work, on the contrary, becomes a place where you are highly transactional, where there is there is a lack of emotions, and where there is no creativity also per se. For a wage earner, there is no creativity. So he says you feel alienated from the society itself. Society in the sense, so many people are there and all are strangers to you. And you go back home to feel homely, but you don't feel that way at the workplace. He says this is alienation from your own alienation from your fellow beings, alienation from the society. And on the contrary, Aristotle has said man is a political animal, man is a social animal. So you are defying your own existence, you are defying those characteristics which make you who you are. Problematic. And he says eventually that while you are working in these factories, what you are doing is you are not freely using your strengths, your mental and physical energies, but your physical and mental energies are being used in a fashion in which you don't want them to use, but you have to do it because you want to earn the wages. So you, being a creative being, are not able to actually lead a life which is meant to be living by a human being. A human being is a creative being, a human being is a social being. So you are divided from society, you are divided from creativity also. Hence, dehumanized existence. He says now you are alienated from humanity also. First you got eliminated from the product of your labor, then you got eliminated from the process of production, then you are getting alienated from society, and eventually you are getting alienated from humankind itself. So he says the end result of this is you are not a human being, you are not behaving like a human being. A human being is meant to behave as a creative and social being, but you are not able to behave like that because of the capitalist system. Alienation, his concept, has been discussed very widely, and it has been one of the very important concepts in Marxism. But for us, it is also important to know that Karl Marx has only discussed the alienation which results because of the relations of production. Whether you are a worker or you are a capitalist, he is discussing alienation from that perspective. But alienation can come from other factors also, which includes ethnic, which includes caste, which includes gender. Why upper castes acting in a hegemonic manner and lower caste feeling alienated because of the actions of the upper caste, especially in India when where we had the practice of untouchability. So those kinds of practices Karl Marx have not included in his analysis, which will become his criticism also. That his idea of alienation lays emphasis only on the class relations, but he neglects all other relations so as to make his case. So in a way, the same argument which we give in Marxism, that the idea is highly reductionist. Not saying it is not relevant, but it is highly reductionist. Okay. Next question is, okay, What is labor, work and action as per Hannah Arendt? What is the importance of action for her? Now, when we talk about labor, work and action, three things for Hannah Arendt and the importance of action for her. Action here is political action. Till the time you are not doing political action, you are not leading a life which a human should live. So human existence is incomplete for her if political action is not there. Through this, she also becomes a proponent of civic republicanism. She is a proponent of civic republicanism because of this idea of political action. But before that, labor, work and action. Now, in order to understand this idea of labor, work and action, first of all, let's try to have a new introduction for this. See, it is a part of her theory of action, and the theory of action has been considered to be a very, very important contribution. Theory of action has been considered to be a very, very important contribution to modern political theory in the 20th century. Rather, it is sometimes called as the most original work of the 20th century. At least before the coming of postmodernists, this would be true, but it has been called as the most original work of the 20th century, the theory of action, which talks about the three conceptions of labor, work and action. So you can start in this way also, instead of the traditional way of starting that she is a phenomenologist and she has given her thoughts on the basis of experience. So that is how generally everyone starts. Instead of that, you can have a new introduction. Now, okay, then you start with the fact that for her there are two important vital actions. One is vita activa and the other is vita contemplativa, out of which she gives more importance to vita activa, in which she is primarily later on creating a hierarchy in this action. First, she gives vita activa more importance over vita contemplativa, and then in this action, she further creates a hierarchy with respect to animal laborum, homo faber, and zoon politikon. Animal laborum being those works which are done because they have to be done. For example, reproduction, it's a biological necessity, has to be done. She classifies those kinds of action under labor. She says man does not have freedom with respect to it. That means you have to do it no matter what. There is no element of choice involved in such actions. She compares it with homo faber, which is in her terminology work which belongs to social sphere, which means those things which we do as a part of living in society. So as a part of living in society, if you're going and building a house, you can build a house which you like. There is freedom, there is choice. You will do it because you're a part of the society and you need a place to live. You may indulge in things like art, literature. As a part of society, you may participate in rites and rituals of the religion. You have some freedom with respect to it because you can choose. And this is the work which she says an individual does because the individual is a part of the social sphere. And finally, she says that individual does the third most important task, which is action, which she says is associated with the condition of zoon politikon, or the condition of the true human existence, which for her means participation in political affairs. So till the time human beings don't participate in political affairs, they are not leading a true life. Why? Because it is the human beings only which have this kind of a luxury to participate in political processes. When it comes to other beings, they don't have this. Why? They don't have the cognitive abilities. So because human being has these cognitive abilities, they should participate in political activities, and that is when they are realizing their true self. Zoon politikon, freedom in true sense, it's a condition of being human. Sorry, the condition of being human is participation in political affairs. It is here where her thoughts are similar to Aristotle also. This also you can mention. So freedom in true sense, why? Because with respect to this, you have absolute freedom also, and only by participating in public affairs is when you will be able to lead to the creation of something which is associated with freedom. So she is making a strong case for political participation by relating it to what the basic essence of human existence is. That is what she is trying to do through her theory of action. So while she is trying to do this and she is making a case for this, in this action she associates two aspects, freedom and plurality, which are features of this action. Meaning, when you go to political sphere, you are participating in political affairs. That is when she is saying two important aspects are getting realized, which becomes the feature of this political action. One is that you are actually able to exercise freedom. Why? This is when you come together and formulate rules and regulations. You come together and create life which you live later on. This is where your expression of being a free individual comes in the best possible manner. Secondly, whenever this action will take place, political action, in which you will be in a free situation, necessarily this action will involve plurality. You cannot alone shape your world. Your world will always be shaped in association with someone else. So, even if you do animal laborum or homo faber, you will not be realizing true human existence. Only when you do zoon politikon or political action, that is when you realize true human existence. True human existence deals with a plural set of people coming together and being able to exercise or live in freedom, which you will only realize when you do political action. So her ideas essentially are relating human existence and the core characteristics of human existence to the need for political participation. And this is where you can say that she is extremely influenced by her experience, because for her the reason for the downfall of the Jews was the fact that they had given no importance to political sphere and they were continuously giving importance to the economic sphere. So for her to make a strong case for political participation, she related it to the basic essence of the life itself, and that is what is the genius of her thought. Okay, most original contribution. Okay.